From Courtside the Virtual Hardwood, it's the NLSC podcast, episode number 383. Andrew with you once again. I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. My co-host and fellow NLSC team member is Derek. You know him in the forum as Diva3, and he is Diva384 on Twitter.
I'm happy to be here again. How about that game we just played of NBA Live 95?
Pretty wild.
Yeah. Andrew and I just played a game of Super NES NBA Live 95 using Parsec. Both of us own the physical copy as well. As people know, we're collectors. And we used, I was the Phoenix Suns, he was the Milwaukee Bucks, kind of like a 2021 NBA Finals, but on NBA Live 95. And I just went absolutely ballistic with Dan Marley. And
that was actually very much like the current NBA, just tossing up threes from 40 feet plus, more than 40 feet.
Except he was hitting them
yeah.
at an alarming rate. I mean, I was hitting from right inside half court, and I want to say I scored 59 points and I think I was 16 for 27 from three in the game. But it was just wild, zany basketball fun, like arcade fun. And the first half was a duel between Ken Norman and Dan Marley, but I was literally laughing. Like I'm laughing at when I hit that fifth three in a row with Dan Marley from like 35 feet. And I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Thunder Dan, when he started raining down, as he did back in the day, of course, maybe not 16 threes in a game. That record was not set at that particular time. But when you started raining it down with Thunder Dan there, I was like, yeah, it's this is going to be hard for me to counteract with Eric Murdoch and Todd Day. With all due respect, they were fine players at the time, but they are not the Splash Brothers at all. They're not an early version of the Splash Brothers. Maybe if I had Abdul Rauf, maybe I might have been able to counteract that, but not quite the shooting, and not even the superstardom of Ken Norman could get me back in that game. And Vin Baker looking Giannis-like. He's doing the job inside, but not much from outside.
Yeah, we also had a play that I think is top 10 worthy, where on one end I did a 360 dunk, and then on the other end you did a 360 into a back slam.
540,
and, yeah, it's just something like that. And I thought it was really impressive how those went like right back to back. And I might include that in the top 10. We had a good top 10 this week too.
We absolutely did. It was great to see, and you've been smoothing out some of those highlights. I mean, obviously you've been doing a lot on your YouTube channel, youtube.com/Diva3, remastering some actual real NBA footage as well. But you were able to smooth out some of those highlights, including a couple of 30 frames per second captures that I sent along.
I'm getting addicted to it. For one thing, with the real NBA, it's nothing like putting an old game that has that lower frame rate, putting it to smooth 60 FPS and watching these guys go to work. You know what I mean? Like watching in 60 FPS Clyde Drexler get a first step and take off and throw it down, and the smooth shooting of Kiki Vandeweghe and Rolando Blackman, and watching James Worthy do a spin move into a jam or a sweet finish or something in like 60 FPS, like what we see it today, right?
Exactly.
Like how we see it today in highlights, and when we're watching on HD TV and whatnot. So I am absolutely addicted to it right now, and I've been uploading real NBA and virtual basketball to my YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to that if you haven't already, NLSC listeners. But you sent me that Clyde Drexler pullback to a crossover into a wide jam. That was a really nice dunk, by the way. It looks really cool on the instant replay. But you sent that to me in 30 FPS, and I converted it to 60 FPS, and oh my God, does that make a difference?
It does.
Like, that highlight looks awesome in the top 10, and I did that actually with 3 other highlights that were submitted to me, including the NBA Live 19 Westbrook Jam, and then one that Teddy Bear the Gamer sent over to me, and then also the Live King, the Giannis dunk on Jay Crowder. That was sent to me in 30 FPS, but I converted it to 60 FPS, and it's smooth as butter.
It really is, yeah.
I basically am going to be doing that consistently now for every top 10 each week. But I love the top 10. We had such a variation in highlights. We had the signature behind the back into a layup with Jamal Crawford. We had the between the legs pass by Penny Hardaway. We had some posterizing dunks, buzzer beaters, Matt Bullard buzzer beater from NBA Live 2001. Just really good variety this week.
Interesting choice to go to Bullard.
Well, you notice I included the substitution screens.
Of course, yeah.
Because his decision with, 1.7 seconds left or whatever it was to rip out NBA legend Akeem Olajuwon and put in Matt Bullard for him. And Matt Bullard not only gets the last shot, but he hit it. And on Instagram, either Nate or Roger Ward, those guys that run that account, I admire their appreciation for NBA Live 2001 and the classics, by the way. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I think it was Roger that said it. He said he was going for height. And my first thought is you just ripped out Akeem Olajuwon from Matt Bullard. But, hey, it worked.
That's the thing.
But it definitely
worked. The madness, yeah. No, I've been enjoying the top 10 as you've been sending it to me each week. And, it's the variety of games and the variety of highlights. Like you said, the between the legs from Penny and the buzzer beaters and the signature behind the back layups and everything. So it's not just dunks, although dunks are always cool, so that they're always going to be in the top 10, I suppose. But a good variety either way.
Yeah, I actually have a submission that came in a little bit late from NBA Live Mobile. And it's actually in pretty good quality. And it's a very nice jam, I believe, after a steal on the fast break. And I'm going to try to get that into the top 10 next week. But I love the different variety of games. I'm getting games from, highlights from NBA Live Mobile, from NBA Live 16, from 19, from, all the different 2Ks and whatnot. So it's definitely been good.
Shout out to that person, real quick. Shout out to that person. I'm glad they actually did get in touch with you, because they did ask in the comments on a previous top 10 how to get in, how they could submit, and whether we would take NBA Live Mobile as well. And I said in my reply, any basketball game, basically. We'll take a Jam It submission. Whether Jam It makes it into the top 10 is another thing. It would have to be something really spectacular from that particular game. But hey, if it's a basketball game, yeah.
Right, exactly. If you play Tiny Toons Acme All-Stars and you jump in your car with Montana Max and you hit a half-court game winner, then it's still basketball. Like, we can still put that in the top 10. By the way, that game is just awesome. That's my favorite cartoon basketball game. The Tiny Toons Acme All-Stars. And if you haven't played that, we're going to have to play that sometime because it's really fun. One thing I wanted to say really quick, last thing about NBA Live 95, before we put that, we wanted to get a quick game in before we shot the podcast. And I was like, you know what, let's put it on low minute quarters. I think we did, 3-minute quarters?
We did, the lowest.
And arcade settings, and just let's have some fun. And it's just nice sometimes to play a game like that where it's just totally loose.
It is. And, we've talked before about being sim and enjoying that style, and we're not the only ones, obviously. But this is why I love arcade games as well. It's why even playing some of the sim games on an arcade setting is fun. It's why even when I was playing 2K Online, I would usually prefer the online team play modes of the Rec or 2K Pro-Am. But going to the playground and playing street ball every so often was a nice change of pace. It's why we need more basketball games in the space. It's why it was great to have Live and 2K and Jam and Street, and yeah, we obviously have collections, you and I. So this is why we dip into them. We don't just collect them to put them on a shelf. In fact, I don't have enough shelf space to display all of my collection. But this is why we dip into our collections.
Yeah, and look how many people, since the Parsec thing has blown up a bit, look how many people have been talking about playing NBA Street and wanting to play NBA Street. A game that came out, close to 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
The Volume 2. Anyway. So it's just really impressive. And you got your first taste of Double Dribble Playoff Edition for Sega Genesis.
I did.
And you told me briefly your thoughts on it. So why don't we tell our listeners, how you felt, I guess, about Double Dribble Playoff Edition? Because let's put it this way, it is nothing like the original.
Not at all. They should have made Double Dribble Good Edition. No, I'm just kidding. It's, again, obviously there's roughness to it, even compared to its contemporaries. It's not the best game I've played of that vintage, or since, obviously. But there's a fun pick-up-and-play aspect to it. And that's what was the great thing about a lot of games back then. And it holds up decently well. I mean, 3-point layups are pretty funny, but it was fun, you know. And we're just messing around. We're not being too serious with it. We are trying. We are playing defense. We are trying to take good shots and to both competing, but it's pretty solid. You know, it is very different from the original. It's a lot more cartoony, but not a bad thing. But I'm just trying to remember, how was it received back in the day?
I think it was pretty average. I want to say that one thing that would have really fixed that game as far as like making it a much better performer. I like that game, by the way. I played it a lot growing up. I really enjoy certain aspects of the game. I like the presentation. I like the music. I like the announcer with the incredible dunk. Harry and everything. Yeah, he's like, incredible dunk. And it's just, I really like it. But if they had made it so the shooting wasn't so wild, like you're shooting in that game, like you saw it, you know, you go up for a shot and he's throwing it behind his head.
Yep.
Or like he's shooting it completely on the way down. It doesn't matter when you release it. Or they're not facing the basket and their arms are flailing wildly when they shoot. If they had just had somewhat more realistic shooting form, I know it's an arcade game, but just something that resembled more real-life shooting, then I think that it would have felt a little bit better. But one thing that I want to applaud it for, and the same thing that I applaud it for NBA Live 95 for a similar reason anyway, is the stealing and blocking is rewarding. And that's where a lot of the competition can kick in, where you can feel like you can actually compete, is like, you know, when you blocked me on that mid-ranger and were able to go down the other end and score, or I blocked you at a shot close to the hoop. I think I did twice on one possession at one point. But the blocking and stealing mechanics are solid in both of those games.
They are, and it's harkens back to something we've said a lot on the show. A saying we come back to a lot is that it has good bones.
Yeah, exactly, and I think both have good passing too, which is another part of important part. It has good bones as far as like the passing, like jump passing and regular passing on Double Dribble Playoff Edition. I really enjoy it. So it has enough, like you said, to have fun with it. It has enough where you can kind of compete and like have true competition with it. And I think if you spent a little bit more time with Double Dribble Playoff Edition and we were able to get some competitive games in, you'd like it even more. How'd you like the Chicago team with no last name, but the Chicago team with the power forward with goggles and the bald shooting guard? You know exactly what they were doing.
I mean, they've switched up the jersey numbers, kind of like they did with Super Dunk Shot, just a little bit. But yeah, you can tell who it's supposed to be. What's his name? Bolf?
Bolf. Yeah.
Bolf. Yeah. Horace
and
Bolf.
George Yeah.
Yeah. Again, something you had to do back in the day for the games that found a way around it, and you wouldn't see it as much these days. You do see it here and there. Obviously, Basketball Classics, what Josh and Dave have done with that is a very similar approach. Just shooting guard, you know, just having the positions, and of course now we can rename them as of the latest patch in Basketball Classics. But yeah, it's just something again that you wouldn't see as much of these days.
Yeah, I'm glad that you played it. It's one of the weirdest sequels I've ever seen. Like you know, when you go from Punch Out to like Super Punch Out, you're like, you can tell that it was based on the original Punch Out, right? But if you just had Double Dribble Playoff Edition and there was no original Double Dribble, you like anything to compare it to? I mean, like, can you really? Like, let me put it a different way. If it didn't have Double Dribble on the name, would you associate that game with Double Dribble? Like, if it wasn't Double Dribble Playoff Edition, if it was just Basketball Playoff Edition, would you say, hey, this looks like Double Dribble? I wouldn't.
Not really, no. Like, I mean, it's 5-on-5, whereas what Double Dribble was Double Dribble 5-on-5 or was more 3 or 4-on-4?
I thought Double Dribble was 5-on-5, but now you've got me questioning it.
But you've certainly got more players kind of bunched up at the same time. It always felt with Double Dribble that you had kind of two hanging out of the backcourt. So you never really sort of had that 10 on the screen at once, I don't think.
Yeah, I remember the Magic Johnson's fast break game. That was so frustrating to me because it was just 2-on-2, full court, with really weird mechanics. But I don't remember it being advertised as 2-on-2.
But beyond
you know
that,
what I mean?
Yeah. Beyond that, though, stylistically, it is very different. You've got these bulky players, kind of these almost like pro wrestlers on the court there. The way they're very muscular and bulky. And, I mean, Double Dribble is not sim as most people wouldn't call it sim in the way we usually think of sim, but it's definitely less arcadey, or at least the home ports anyway, compared to Playoff Edition. But it was fun. One thing that I did have a bit of problems with was switching players, and when the player that you're controlling is illuminated a little bit brighter than the others. Sometimes it was a bit disorientating trying to find my player in a scrum. Basically, that's a bit of a design flaw there.
Yeah, I feel that too. Because they don't have like the circle underneath.
Yeah, no indicator.
And it would definitely help. I will say that the original Double Dribble, in my opinion, probably has overall. I'm going to say it might have better gameplay, even though it's older by quite a few years than Double Dribble Playoff Edition. I still think that the original NES Double Dribble probably has better gameplay overall than Playoff Edition. I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, there's different mechanics, obviously, that you get on Double Dribble Playoff Edition, but there's still some, like the shooting still bugs me on it.
It does, and like you said, you have to have a realistic looking, for the time anyway, even if it's cartoony, it has to be something that resembles an actual shot, unless you're going full Looney Tunes. Like, obviously, Looney Tunes B-Ball, some of the shooting forms are deliberately cartoonish, and it looks good because it's very well animated, that particular game, but it does look very clunky, very weird, some of those shooting forms. You're flying out to the baseline, back to the basket, and flipping it over with a weird kind of half hook, half backwards jump shot. And it goes in, so you're like, okay, I'll take the 2 points, or the 3 points, as the case may be, if you can get that to go beyond the 3-point arc, obviously. But I am glad that we revisited those two games. Cool to play Playoff Edition for the first time, having played the original already. But yeah, Live 95, it just really holds up, and we were playing it arcade, as you said. So although we were actually, for the first half, like you said, we were kind of playing it realistically, and then we just, oh, that's right, we're playing arcade. We don't have fouls on. We don't have fatigue on. We can just go wild. And then Thunderdan did, and that was it, basically. But again,
I went off the. I'm the one who kind of ruined the kind of realistic approach that we were trying to take in the first half. And I think, like I said, I hit like 5 threes in a row with Marley, and I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm gonna fire. And I just kept firing. And then you kind of got into the act in the fourth quarter. But yeah, it was a really loose, fun time.
It was. It gets to that point where you're wondering, okay, how crazy can I get? What kind of threes can I hit? How many can I hit? And the answer is there. What, 16 of 27 for Thunderdan? It was a lot. Yeah.
And it seemed like it was working pretty well for you this time too. A little bit better, anyways, than we had played before.
A little bit.
Yeah, obviously not perfect. Like I gave you the ball back on one possession, but yeah, there were some shots you were taking in the fourth quarter where you were smoking them, and you were shooting really good-looking shots.
At the moment, it's about getting used to the lag for me in any particular game. That's where That's why I like going back to Live 10, because I'm very used to that at the moment. Whereas when I switch it up with other games, having to get used to their mechanics and their timing, that's what throws me off. But we are working on it. I am going to be doing some upgrades as well, which will hopefully get us being able to play pretty much anything as smoothly as you've been able to play with other people, which you have been doing, and that's been great to see. We've been uploading some highlights to the YouTube channel, your channel as well, obviously. We have the Parsec section set up in the community. We have a Discord. There's a link there for people who want to get involved with that. Community's just taking to it.
Been awesome. Got a couple games in against Kid Cash on NBA Street Volume 2. King J Mace, actually, I got a couple games in with him, but then he got in touch with a few people he knows in the modding community, and he connected with them on Parsec. And he told me that it was amazing. So I really like the fact that they're not just connecting with me now, because that's how it started, right? Like, yeah. I was just playing with everybody. And they're kind of branching out now and reaching out to other people. And they are, connecting with them, and it's working well. And I think the settings that I put in the forum are working for everybody as far as I know. And that also makes me feel good. We have that chat now. We have the Discord where people can set up games with other people. And I hope it continues to take off, because it's just really fun to see the highlights that, people post when of their games, and then they get to look at the ones that I play. So it's good stuff.
And that way you don't have to be organizing everything. It's not just coming down to you playing it, but obviously it's something we want to get involved with. Great to see people jumping in. Again, we have that Parsec section in the forum now where you can organize meetups. We have the Discord link is in there, the invite link. And once again, share your highlights with us. So we'll share them as well.
Yeah, I shared some highlights from a few games that I had with Stildo, 33, who works on the NBA 2K19 rosters. And we are having so much fun with this, and it's such a great experience that when the 94-95 roster is released for 2K19, him and I are going to do a My League, and he's going to use the Orlando Magic with Penny and Shaq and Dennis Scott and Nick Anderson and whatnot. And I am going to use the Celtics with Dino Raja and Dominique Wilkins and D Brown and whatnot.
McDaniel.
And we're going to, yep, exactly. What we're going to do. I love Xavier McDaniel, by the way. It was a huge thing when he ended up signing with the Celtics. But what we're going to do is we're going to play a full season. We're going to be each other's opponents, and we're going to do 8-minute quarters. And we're really excited about it. And how cool is that? Not like a My League online thing that, we have to enter that mode or anything like that, or we have to depend on 2K servers or anything. We're going to use Parsec. He's going to play off of my game. I'll set the schedule so we don't have to simulate any games, so I'll rig the schedule, and we are going to just play a full My League.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I can't even believe it. Yeah. So, but I did post some highlights on my YouTube, and I sent you a few videos to post on your YouTube, on the NLSC YouTube of those games. We had, what was it, Portland Trailblazers versus, who did he use in that game? Oh, the Hornets. 93-94 roster, Blazers versus Hornets, and then we had 92-93 roster, Hawks versus Suns, etc. It's just been a lot of fun, and I really hope that our listeners who haven't picked up Parsec yet download it.
Definitely recommend it. And before we move on to some news this week, quick philosophical question about a 95 roster update. Do you make Michael Jordan number 23 or number 45 in a 95 roster update? Because he switched back to 23 at the very end there. So a final roster using number 23 is technically accurate, but it's also the uniqueness of 45. Which way do you go?
Well, we have a problem a little bit with that. So with these rosters on 2K19, they're doing beginning of the season rosters.
Right.
Like that's what yeah. And when I do my rosters, as you know, I do end of the season, like the playoff rosters or like just end of the season rosters. So before we start that season, I'm going to do all the trades and all the signings in order to make it an end of the season roster so we can play through with that. So that's the number one thing. The number two thing, the beauty of NBA 2K, and Live should learn from this, is you can just edit the players in the season at any time,
True.
Right? And edit whatever you want on them. So probably what we'll end up doing, and it's the same thing that I'm doing with my brother's season, and I'll talk about that in a second, with another player, but we'll have him number 45 to start and then switch it, right at the end of the season or whatever to number 23. But like my brother and I are doing an 89-90 season right now, and Buck Williams is on the Portland Trailblazers, and I'm using them for a season. But Buck Williams didn't wear goggles for almost the entire regular season and started wearing them in the playoffs. So, like right now, I have him without goggles because we're playing through the season. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mod him in with goggles and
Cool.
have him that way for the playoffs. So it's just the opportunities are just endless, honestly, with modding and editing and all that stuff.
Still want to get something going like a 2009 playoffs replay or the between the Bulls and Celtics series replay with Live 10 or something like that.
What I'd like to do is actually start a Live 10 season, especially I think what it would be good is when you upgrade your stuff. You get the Windows 10, DirectX 11, all that stuff. When you're really ready to go, I'd like to start an NBA Live 10 season and just be your opponent every game for the season. I think that would be fun.
I was thinking playoffs. I was thinking the playoffs because that has a standalone playoffs mode.
We could, but there's something more fun about playing through a season. For me.
That's true.
I mean, I'd like to see you progress through a season, me be your opponents. If you have to make any deals or whatever, trades or anything like that, you can do that or sign players. I think that would be fun content to put up. And I also think the community would eat it up, as far as like you uploading consistently, like the game highlights.
Sure.
They can follow it through the season. So just stuff like that. I think it would be kind of fun if we ever got that going.
We'll see what we can do once it's all up and running properly. But that's basically what we've been playing this week. I want to touch on some news now, and there's a forthcoming announcement from EA Sports. We don't know what it's going to be, Derek, but we do know that they're going to be announcing the return of a series, or future plans for an old series. A lot of people speculating live, fight night, college basketball. We know the college football is coming back in the future, but obviously I think you and I both, what we prefer is that it is NBA Live. And what do we think the chances are of that?
Well, first off, I don't think it's going to be fight night. And I think the reason is because boxing in itself is mostly dead now. Nobody really knows the names at the top. It's turned into like a celebrity joke, right? Like they're fighting YouTubers now.
Yeah.
Like that's what boxing has turned into. So unless you're going to do something silly like that and put like Jake Paul or Logan Paul in there or something like that, and turn Fight Night into a 2021 joke, then I don't think, like I said, I don't think they're bringing back Fight Night. So I'm going to scratch that off the list. I think it comes down to either NBA Live or NCAA. And the NCAA players, bringing back the NCAA basketball series, formerly March Madness. I think that, now with the college players allowed to get paid for their likeness use and whatnot, it allows these companies to approach them and, legally get these players and teams into the games. So I think it could be the return of NCAA basketball. But it could also be, like I said, I still thought NBA Live was coming back. I've said that since day one, that I thought that NBA Live 22 was going to come out and that they weren't going to waste this opportunity. So it could very well be that as well. What do you think?
Well, I mean, a lot of people are speculating that it's NCAA basketball. And they're kind of saying, well, if you're giving up on Live, go to NCAA. At the end of the day, they still have to make a basketball game, right? So, I mean, I suppose you're not directly competing with 2K if that is the NBA game and you've got the college basketball game. But I still think the NBA is the biggest seller. I saw somewhere the other day, I can't remember where, somebody said, oh, EA doesn't have the NBA license anymore. I don't know who came up with that because they've still got NBA Live Mobile. They still have a license with the NBA, as far as I know anyway. I mean, they're not pulling NBA Live Mobile or anything, so I would assume they still have the license. Certainly with the timing, with the college athletes being able to be compensated, a long overdue ruling there, by the way. I mean, it's a possibility. I would still think it's going to be live over college basketball. And here's the thing, even if it is college basketball, they've been struggling to get live where it needs to be. Is it going to be any better if it's college basketball? I suppose, again, I suppose you're not competing with 2K directly in so much as it's college versus NBA, but then are people going to go for a college game over an NBA game? I would still say that they would bring NBA Live back first, I feel anyway.
There's another reason why I think that I lean towards it being NBA Live, other than that's what I thought since the beginning, that they were going to try to come back for Live 22. Another reason is because that decision on paying players, like players being allowed to make money off of their likeness use and whatnot, that just happened.
Very new, yeah.
Recently. Yeah. So, I mean, unless they were developing an NCAA game over this time just in anticipation of this happening, like of this passing, of the ruling and whatnot, then how are they going to push out a game anytime soon, an NCAA game? Because like you said, they still got to make the game. So yeah, I mean, I lean more towards NBA Live 22, but I think both could be a possibility if they announce the return of NCAA basketball, then they could say, hey, it's coming back in 2022. I could see something like that happening.
What about an NBA Street? Because that's the other thing that people are throwing around. NBA Street. I don't
know. I have no hope for that.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to go into that simulation space and try to get involved with that with the only one competitor and everything. I feel like NBA Street is dead. It's been too long now. We're looking at 18 years since Street Volume 2. And when was the last street?
Was 2007 was home court. So we're looking 14 years.
Right. So yeah, so we're like 14 years from that. Do I think that a new street made well would be amazing? Oh my God, yeah. I would buy it on day one.
Same.
If it released at midnight, I buy it at midnight. But I don't think that they're going to bring that back. That's just my opinion.
I forget who the YouTuber was that did it, but they did a very good video on why series like NBA Street went the way the dodo. And it is basically because they're not guaranteed moneymakers like an annual release, and they're more of an artistic passion project. And developers and publishers rather, are going for those safe bets, those annual releases, the ones they can just churn out year after year, things that... So it's a shame, but it is the way of AAA gaming, that a lot of the creativity is more on the indie scene these days. Now, it's hard not to sound like a snob to say that. Obviously, I buy a lot of AAA games, NBA 2K, for example. But we're seeing less of those creative games from the AAA space. We're seeing it on the indie scene. So it's we're not going to see the new jams and the new streets. I'd love to see it. I would absolutely buy it. If they upgraded On Fire Edition for the latest season, added some more legends, as many legends as they could license that 2K doesn't have exclusive contracts with, that would be fantastic. That tech still holds up. I've been playing a lot of On Fire Edition recently and having a blast with it. But it's not going to make the numbers. It's not going to have that widespread appeal that the sim titles have. So, yeah, I don't see it, unfortunately. So I don't think Jam, I don't think Street. I think most likely live. If it's going to be a basketball game, it's going to be live. And to that end, a lot of the other thing that people are saying, and we have touched on this before, but it's worth revisiting. People are saying, "Oh, the NBA Live name is ruined. It's dead. It's whatever. They should change it to something else." Do you have any updated thoughts, or are your thoughts still the same on that topic as well?
Well, I want to bring up a couple things, and I'll jump on that as well, because that's a great question. First off, we got to get another game or two on NBA Jam 2010. We got to play that again, because that was fun the last time we did it. Even though you had a little bit of lag, it still played well, and we had some fun moments there. So I think that would be really fun. Number two, I'm going to disagree with the people that say that it can't have a wide appeal. I'm gonna point to it again. I'm gonna point to a game like Rocket League, and I'm gonna point to many other Steam games that have hundreds of thousand reviews and just ridiculous amount of sales that are not from AAA titles, like AAA companies and whatnot, that are not, sim or anything like that. If you make a game well, and you make connectivity sound, and people can play together or against each other, and you market it the right way, I think a street ball video game can do unbelievably well.
Oh, I agree. I think it's more the problem is the publishers won't go for they won't allow that artistic creativity that they used to. It's only the publishers, not. I mean, people will love it.
Yeah, look how creative and great NBA Street Volume 2 was. I keep bringing that game up because I've just been playing it a lot. Just from everything from the art direction, the graphics, the animations, the amount of moves that you can do. There's so much depth to the gameplay on NBA Street Volume 2. It's my favorite arcade basketball game of all time.
It's a great one.
It really is. Yeah, it just every time I pick up the sticks on it, I just have an absolute blast.
We need to give that one a go. We haven't tried that one yet, I don't think. Well, have we?
It's so fun. We got to play that. Actually, the next time we get on there, we should play that one. As far as NBA Live and the NBA Live name, I completely disagree with that. I think that changing the name is showing weakness. I do. I think changing the name is showing defeat. I think it's you guys, we failed the NBA Live name, and you guys have pummeled us into submission. We can't come back from this. We're going to change the name. And it brings me back to NBA Elite. You know what I mean? Like, to that time, I think that was silly at the time, and I think it would be silly today. I think that NBA Live still has great games behind it. People still have fond memories of some of the games from the past, even like as recent as NBA Live 10 and whatnot, and NBA Live 19. Once again, we talked about it. It was received well. When it first came out, the reviewers were giving it 7+ on scores, whether it be IGN or other reviewers and whatnot. There was a lot of buzz in the community, a lot of positive comments about the game, about the fluid animations and everything. Was NBA Live 19 a great game? No. Has a lot of issues, especially after the patching. But Did the NBA Live name hurt NBA Live 19?
Not at all. No.
And that's just a couple of years ago. So no, I think it would be, it's the same as I said before. I think it would be admitting defeat. It would be a submissive, weak move. And I think that they need to stand by that name. And it's been proven as recent history that the name is not going to hurt the reception.
I'm with you on that one. Look, I see where they're coming from with that argument that Live is associated with a lot of failures over the past, 2-3 generations, whatever you want to call it, going back to Xbox 360. But the name change is not going to make a difference. Even if you call it NBA Showdown, bring back the Showdown name, for example, people are going to say, oh, that's from EA Sports, the people who made NBA Live. It's not going to be good. If they're going to make that connection, you know what I mean? They're going to see that it's the brand that they're going to look at is not so much NBA Live, although of course that is the name they're familiar with, but it is the EA Sports part of that. So they can call it NBA Showdown. They can call it NBA on ESPN, since they have the ESPN license, I imagine. You can call it whatever you want, but if people are going to dump on it automatically, it's going to be because it's a game coming from EA Sports, a brand that people don't trust, and that is the bigger problem. And now hopefully they can get over that with a great release and bring back the NBA Live name, which, as you say, also has the benefit of nostalgia attached to it. But you can change that name, and people are still going to doubt it or love it or whatever. The bottom line is they have to come up with a great game, as we've said so many times before. But, yeah, you change the name, people are going to still point at it and say, haha, EA. So changing the name is just getting rid of the nostalgia.
Yeah, instead of EA Sports, it's in the game. You can change it to EA Sports. Live is not in the name. Just do the same voice and everything. Yeah, I think it would be absolutely ridiculous. Like you said, the EA Sports is, that name is still going to be behind it, and people are still going to associate it with the same, the suits, the developers, all of that stuff. The marketing is still going to be from EA Sports, all of that stuff. So I think it's absolutely ridiculous, the idea of changing it, to be completely honest with you. And I think the reasons given for changing it, people aren't, and I know I say this all the time, but people are not thinking big picture.
Big picture.
They're not thinking also of recent success that they actually had with the game and the monumental disappointment that occurred when we found out that they were canceling again for Live 20.
And the bigger picture is that it doesn't matter about the name that they put on it. They can change it to Elite. They can change it to whatever. Showdown, NBA on ESPN, NBA Live, whatever name they want to give it. That rebranding doesn't matter because it is still coming from EA Sports. So people are going to... The people who are not going to trust the game from EA Sports are not going to suddenly say, oh, well, they changed the name, so it's going to be better. Especially when you think about NBA, because you said NBA Elite 11, they changed the name, and that didn't turn out better, did it? So I think it is very myopic to look at that. Understand where it's coming from and understand the idea of a tarnished name, but I also think there's too much value in that name, and the benefits of keeping the name outweigh any possible benefits from changing it. So if they're going to remake NBA Live, call it NBA Live.
You make a great game, and you market it correctly, it will be received well. Listen, do you know how many times there's been an actor that made like 7 crappy movies? Like he was in just movies that were just not very good, and then they make a great movie and cast this actor, and he doesn't, and he does well in his role, and it blows up. Like that movie blows up. Like that's happened a lot. Like it's the same type of thing. The actor is still the actor. It's still by the same name. He still had those prior failures in those other movies, but does that mean that new movie sucked? Right? It was marketed the right way. The trailers were done the right way. All of that stuff. He presented himself the right way, and then the movie sold. So I look at it like that.
I want to say Nicolas Cage, maybe, as a comparison.
I can think of, if I had a little bit more time, I could definitely think of quite a few people that, they had quite a few clunkers, and then they came out and just blew it away in a movie, and it was a huge, in the movie was a big hit. We'll have to revisit that. Maybe in the next podcast we can actually drop some names about this topic.
How about EA calls it NBA Cage 22?
I hope you're not thinking of the movie Face Off as a flop.
No, I'm not, no. Although, to that point, John Travolta would be a good example of an actor who came back from bad movies. Travolta.
Oh, yeah, because he went on a huge streak of bad movies.
Yeah.
Actually. And then came back. But Face Off, that movie, John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, is actually one of my childhood favorites. I absolutely love
That's
that
a classic.
movie.
No, I was thinking of that as a strong one. Or he sort of had a few in between Face Off and some of his more recent ones, I feel. But
yeah,
and,
I mean,
look,
Face Off doesn't really make any sense, but yeah. So.
I just want to say NBA Cage 22, because of course back in the day basketball was played in cages and basketball players were known as cageurs. So what a tribute to the history of the NBA in its 75th anniversary. I mean, this writes itself. NBA Cage 22. There you go. Okay, I'm all on board for this name change to NBA Cage 22. No, not really.
NBA Cage 22. You could put Nicolas Cage basically in anything.
He's on the cover.
Just the way. That's what. Yeah, he's the cover athlete, the cover actor. I did want to point something out too. So I brought up Stildo 33 earlier. The fact that I've gotten some more games in with him. Man, does he talk trash. But you know what? I was prepared for it, and I've been giving it back. But he can be down 20, 25 points, and he's still talking trash. And it's like, this is amazing. Because like he said, and you know what I love about this? This is everything. We're talking after we played, I think we played 3 games that night. You were talking, and he said, I got to be honest with you, I feel like I'm 16 again. And I thought that was awesome. And that's how fun it is to play human versus human, right? That's how fun it is to have that competitive experience, and it's like it's a shared experience, right?
Absolutely.
When something amazing happens in the game, you can't turn to the computer and be like, "Oh, did you see that?" You know what I mean? Or like comment to them, like, because they're not real. So, but when a big play happens, like when he had that D Brown inbounds alley-oop dunk that made the top 10, he messaged me right away and he goes, "Oh my God, top 10." And we got to experience that together. And just nothing beats it. Like, he makes that comment and I'm like, oh my God, when he made that comment, I'm just like, I want to promote Parsec more. Like, I need to get more people on this platform. And you've seen my push for that.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's been refreshing, even just going back and playing some solo Live 10 or on Fire Edition. Taking that break from, and you don't realize just how much with recent 2Ks, for example, that it's all about the grind to get a player up or get cards for my team. There's so much work to enjoy, and there is some enjoyment in that process, but the ability to just pop in a game and just enjoy virtual basketball, and I know I've said this on previous shows, and it's really just hitting me how much I should have taken a break and gone back and spent more time, not just revisiting them for Way Back Wednesday, which I love doing, but actually just putting them back in the rotation. And so this is something I'd obviously recommend to anybody, not just, obviously Parsec, this is a great initiative that we have going at the moment as well, but even if you just want to play solo, if you're not enjoying the recent game, find the oldest game or the most recent game, if you will, that you can still enjoy and it still gives you that, you can still have that passion for, and go back and play that. Do not force yourself to play the latest game if you can play an older game. There's no... Look, when 2K22 comes out, I'm sure I'll be playing. Hopefully that will be a great game. I'll be spending time with that. But being able to rotate into that collection has been very refreshing.
Go back and play, like, if you still have it, like 2K17 and jump into a My League.
Sure.
Or something. You can still use the base customization, like move your team, choose the GOAT logo or something like that, and put together a team or something. Listen, those rosters are now classic. Messed up, right? Like, if you really think about it, NBA 2K15, NBA 2K14, 16, 17, you look back at those teams, and hardly any of those guys are in those places anymore.
That's right.
It's almost like using a classic team
retro
roster.
Rosters, yeah.
Yeah, like a retro roster. It's really cool if you really think about it. And you can revisit those. Like, I was putting on NBA 2K15, and I'm looking through the teams with my brother, and it's just like, man, these are nothing like they are today. And it was only 6 years ago, and it looks like a classic roster now.
A lot of turnover,
like something mod, like a mod, yeah. So yeah, go. I know that you guys don't. A lot of you people don't only enjoy the online part, right?
Definitely.
And I know that most people don't enjoy a grind. Like, they don't love that, and a lot of people actually have more frustration than joy in the online scene, but they're just trying to connect with people, right?
Yep.
Or be part of something, etc. But I know that a lot of you people enjoy other stuff other than that. So like My League or a season or whatever, or My NBA now or whatnot. But in those older games, My League, Association and whatnot, jump into that. Go back and play one of those games and have fun. And call up your friends, please, and play other humans. You know, if you have a sibling, try to get them involved. Call up your friends, have them come over. I know that's a lost concept. Everybody wants to text and play online, but get your friends to come over your house or your apartment or whatnot and actually jump on the sticks with you. Because like I said, I'll tell you, you know, that reaction from Stildo, the reactions I've had from King J Mace, the reactions from Hornets on Fire when we were playing, they just absolutely love it, right? There's nothing like playing another human in that capacity. So, yeah, you know, call your friends.
And
Get them over.
It's important to keep in mind that it is supposed to be fun. And I think that is something that we have lost sight of. And I think the bottom line is to just enjoy games, which is what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be work. It's not supposed to be repetitive grinding to the point of, okay, I've finally got a playable avatar, or I've finally got the cards. Oh, and now a new game's out, and that all goes back to square one again. And I've been doing that for the past few years with playing a lot of my career in the connected modes. I can see now just how repetitive it was. And when you're involved with it, you're having some fun with it, don't get me wrong. But putting that aside, even just playing some other stuff in 2K21, but going back, doing these fantasy matchups in Live 10, obviously, and playing on Fire Edition, playing some other games with you or just by myself, it's just been so refreshing to do, and it does make me a little bit wistful for the future of basketball gaming. It's hard not to be a bit cynical about that. We touched on that last week, and other shows as well, obviously. But we are getting closer and closer to some kind of preview season for NBA 2K22, and people are already starting to speculate, talking about... Well, I mean, I'm seeing more cynicism as well. People thinking that it's going to be just more of the same, or people that are very unexcited about the lack of a preview season, and mentioning how they do this every year and how it's just that we don't get to hear anything until the game is almost out. But we're already seeing some apologism. And yeah, I just don't like that at all.
What was my first comment to you about that? So that was on NBA Reddit.
Yeah.
And NBA 2K Reddit. My first comment to you was, I wonder who controls that account.
Yeah.
That's a big account. That account has connections. That account does updates, news, all of that, takes in feedback, all of that stuff. So you got to wonder if that's prepping the community for something. And I think that was the first thing I said to you. You know, it almost like it's prepping, like they are prepping the community for disappointment, for a game maybe that doesn't have the updates that people may hope that they have, right? Maybe it's a very similar experience to the 2K21 that we just got on next gen. Maybe we won't get a PC version that's next gen. Like, there's a lot of different things that I think about when I see official Reddit accounts or big popular Reddit accounts or any other social media platform, the big ones, when I see comments like that. So I think you had a similar reaction.
I did, and they're not the only ones to do that. We've seen people with influencers in the community also put it out there. And look, it's worth acknowledging the challenges of video game development at the best of times, let alone in the face of a global pandemic. But at the same time, it did seem to be trying to not lower expectations, but almost make excuses for, something may not be as good as you thought. And yes, certainly this has been a very unique situation over the past 12, 18 months, but there are issues in 2K21, current gen and next gen, that have been in there for 4 or 5 years or more. So if you want to say, okay, they've had some difficult development conditions over the past 12, 18 months, that's fair enough, that's understandable. But what about 2016, 2015, 2017?
Right. Well, like you said, a lot of what they've done is, was marketing to get all those pre-sales up and those initial orders and, the whole building from the ground up campaign, like all that marketing and what the Zion trailer, which was BS, all of that stuff. So, if you want to lie or exaggerate or, say things like it's built from the ground up, even though it has the same blueprint and all of that stuff, and then not deliver, and then deliver a game that has a lot of the same legacy issues and then some new issues and just poor AI and all the stuff we've talked about before. If you want to do that, you better be prepared for a community that's going to fight back, right? And I think that's why that NBA 2K Reddit did that post. Because I think that people that run those big accounts are connected. We talked about this. They're fed information, right?
Yeah.
They're fed information. They're usually a developer or in with the developers or in with the suits, all of that stuff, and they control the content. So the person who, in my opinion, the person that posted that has a legitimate reason for wording it the way they did and posting it the way they did and when they did. So, you know what?
It's very familiar language, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. I mean, we've heard it before. The thing is I don't think I've heard it this close to a release date before.
There was some around next gen release last year. I saw some influencers floating at that kind of that very shill take of, oh, the haters are going to criticize this and pull this apart because to a shill.
Oh no, I remember that. I can't even remember. Oh no, there was multiple big YouTubers around the same time last year, and I'm trying to think of some of the names that came out with videos, almost like apologism videos, even before the game came out, but then also were on Twitter saying things like that. Oh, the 2K haters are going to be out in full force when the new game is released, and they're going to complain about anything.
It's the first step is to preemptively dismiss criticism. It is a tried and true shill technique to preemptively defend the game, apologize for the issues. I don't really know even apologizing for the issues sometimes, but certainly preemptively paint any criticism as hating and calling people whiners, haters, whatever, so that when the game comes out, if there is legitimate criticism, you're already fighting against this image of being a hater or a whiner, crybaby, whatever you want to say. They use all kinds of loaded language to do this. And it really bothers me as somebody who tries to be fair-handed, who tries to be in-depth in critique and the way I cover basketball games. So I hate to see that kind of shilling and that apologism. And look, I know that there are people who are haters, there are people that bash, and there are people that don't take things into account about how difficult video game development is at the best of times, let alone in the last couple of years. But no, that stuff, it's just really disrespectful to your fellow gamer. If you're an influencer doing that, shame on you.
Yeah. And you know what, though? They have those influencers wrapped around their little fingers.
Yeah.
So that's why it happens. And they don't want to lose their perks. And we talked about this. The funny part is if NBA Live suddenly took off and it blew up and it became more popular, or the trendy thing, that those influencers would just jump ship and go right over to NBA Live and start begging for that.
I would love to see EA slam the door in their face and open it up to people like more fair-minded people like us, just putting it out there. But yeah, I would love to see it because you don't get to spend years dumping on a product and then turn around and try and shill for them. It's just, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not confident they'd be shut out because they've got that big audience, but I'd love to see EA say, no, you've been really anti-us for years. We're going to work with some people who are open to working with our brand. Not just
I think we need somebody else in there because NBA 2K, once again, with NBA 2K22, if it does come out flat, if it does come out with the same issues or almost the same as 2K21 Next Gen with no big improvements, what's going to end up happening is they're going to get away with it again. And they're going to get over 10 million buys. Like people are going to buy, they're going to sell over 10 million copies, and people are they're going to complain. They're going to have the same poor scores on Metacritic and on Steam, and people are going to get frustrated with the game. But at the same time, 2K will have a whole another year of getting away with it. So we need competition in the space. So I hope that EA announcement is NBA Live, to be honest.
Sadly, it is not a golden age at the moment, but that kind of takes us into this week's mailbag. So how about we open up the mailbag and answer some questions, Derek?
Yeah, we got a couple good questions this week, so appreciate that. And I think we only had one last week, so this is great.
So on the subject of golden eras and whatnot, Derek, the B-Ball Pundit, at B-Ball Pundit on Twitter, shout out to you as always, has suggested a topic this week, the peak era or generation, 5 to 10 year period that is, for all of basketball gaming as a whole. Again, we've said that the current era is not the golden era, sadly, despite more technological advances than ever before and everything can be done with online. But what do we feel is the peak era or generation of basketball gaming as a whole?
Wow. So I'm going to say 2003 to 2013.
Yeah.
Is that allowed? Is it 5-10 years? Yeah.
5-10 years,
so
yeah.
2003 to 2013. And I'm going to say The reason is because in 2003 is when we got Street Volume 2. But we also got a huge improvement in NBA Live and NBA Live 2003 when they switched over to right stick dribbling, and the game was just fluid and fun, and me and my brothers dived into that like crazy. We loved it. I told you that. In fact, sometimes I prefer NBA Live 2003 over Live 2004. And they also still had the NBA Inside Drive titles. NBA Shootout was still coming out, and they had all of these different, they had the arcade games, the streets and whatnot. It was just such a good selection of video games, and the games were really starting to get better, right? Like they were starting to get more mechanics. There were starting to be things more stat tracking, all of that stuff. So I'm going to say it's a great start in 2003, and just so many different selections. But then you got to think about it. It was Xbox 360 and PS3 that came next. And when you go all the way up to 2013, you have NBA 2K13, NBA 2K12, NBA 2K11, which are three of the strongest releases in NBA 2K's history. And by doing that, and you go live from 2003 to 2013, you get some of the best NBA Live games ever made. Live 2003, Live 2004, Live 2005, Live 2006, and then Live 2010 is actually thrown in there, and a improvement in NBA Live 2009. And you get NBA Jam in there, NBA Jam 2010, NBA Jam on Fire Edition. Some of the best basketball video games ever made are in that 10-year stretch, and there's a lot of them. So in my opinion, that would be the best stretch. If I had to choose 5 years, I would probably go 2003 to 2008, and that's because Live was stronger, 2K was still incredibly strong, and you had those arcade titles like Street Volume 2 and whatnot.
And that is a tremendous era of basketball gaming. It does encompass kind of to the start of microtransactions as well. And I know it's hard not to beat a dead horse on this, but the big changes that have come into basketball gaming over the past generation or so started in 2013, did they not? So it's kind of getting to the start of that is, I think that it's the end of a very strong era, at the very least.
Yeah. I think that what ended up happening was they went away, we've talked about this so many times before, they went away from that immersive NBA experience, that and the play with your friends locally experience, and the play with your siblings, the local co-op, local against, all of that stuff. And they started moving into that online scene. So, I could say that 2010 to 2020 had some pretty awesome games, right? It's the best era for NBA 2K. Because of 2K 11, 12, 13, 14 strong release, 15, 16, 17, all of those games were just incredibly strong. But how can I say that 2010 to 2020 when it was Live half the time not even being released, NBA 2K being the only sim player in the space really, making quality basketball games, and then, no real arcade releases outside of NBA Jam 2010, and there's no NBA Shootout, there's no NBA Inside Drive, there's none of those other games, or NBA 09 or whatever. So yeah, I can't choose something PS4, PS5.
No, I'm inclined to agree, and it is very hard to go against that as a golden era, or certainly one of the peak eras of basketball gaming. I mean, here we could also split hairs about what is a golden era, what is a peak era, and talk about what actually makes. I mean, if you go back far enough, the games are getting more primitive, obviously, but at the same time, the fun we had with them is sometimes much more than their more advanced counterparts. I have to admit, though, my first thought of a peak era was actually 95 to 2005, because that kind of encompasses having an NBA Jam still being a big thing, NBA Jam Tournament Edition coming out, those early NBA Live games that were improving year after year. You had a lot of other players in the space. You also had 2K coming along as the new millennium hits. And there's some very strong releases between 95 and 2005, and as I said, it is improving pretty much every year on a lot of those games. couple of stumbles here and there with the NBA Live series at least, but pretty constant improvement from the 16-bit era through to that, what was it, 6th generation, I believe, of consoles, and of course the PC gaming, the height of PC modding, NBA Live modding, probably in that era as well. So that would be my second candidate. The problem with that is that it doesn't include the later really good 2K releases like 2K11, 12, 13, and 14. So that is the problem with 95 2005, and there are certainly more primitive releases in there. But when I think back to the fun we were having at the time and the way the games were improving, that would be... It's up there, I think, that era, 95 to 2005 as well.
I can agree with that. And I think that I had such a blast with basketball video games in the mid 2000s and late 2000, the mid 90s and late 90s and early 2000s, and games like, the college basketball games too, like Coach K college basketball, right? Yeah. And Dick Vitale's Awesome Baby college basketball, which I don't know if you've ever played it, but that's one that we could revisit at some time as well. And I played endless hours on NBA Live 96, Live 98, and Live 2000, and obviously great PC releases as well. And of course, my introduction to PC gaming with those titles. So, and of course, we talked about it. What about NBA in the Zone and NBA Shootout back then, and those titles, the other titles we had to choose from, and then obviously the arcade games and the copycat games of NBA Jam back then. So I can see that, and I wouldn't argue with anybody. I just find NBA 2K11, 2K12, 2K13, even 2K7, 2K8, 2K9, 2K10 to be just too overwhelmingly important, and that's why I gravitate to 2003 to 2013. But especially 2K11, 2K12, and 2K13. So yeah, I can, but I'm not going to argue with you.
That is the problem with 95 to 2005, is that you lose that a lot of improvements, a lot of technological improvements and content improvements as well, because again, the Jordan Challenge, retro teams, something we never thought, we did kind of see the Legends teams before, and going way back to NBA Action 94 obviously, but to see that done as well as it has been done, at least in the early days with the retro teams in 2K, it's hard to go past that as well. But I think that those are two very strong eras, that 95 to 2005, 2003 to 2013. Even if you go 2000 to 2010, that's a pretty strong era as well. That encompasses a lot of great live releases, the rise of 2K, culminating with 2K11. So you can kind of have some pretty good spans there. Anything but the last decade, unfortunately.
I'm probably going to argue with somebody if they say 1980 to 1990.
You don't care for NBA in television? NBA basketball in television, I should say?
Well, see, Double Dribble...
That game had a set shot button. Name me another game with a dedicated set shot button.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to say this. If you say 1980 to 1990, I want you to tell me how many games you remember that you enjoyed from that time frame. If you're going to say that, because that's a tough sell. I'm going to be honest. I'm not even crapping on that era. You know how I feel about Double Dribble. And then games that came shortly after, like Jordan versus Bird and whatnot. You know how I feel. But I can't consider it the golden age.
Well, gaming in general was in its infancy, was it not? So we can't. It's hard to give it to that generation. But
right,
hey,
exactly.
Make an argument. We'll listen to it. It'd be interesting to hear that argument. But nevertheless, we'd probably go for one of those later spans that we said. But thank you very much for the question. Let us know what you feel. Is the both B-Ball Pundit and anybody else listening? Let us know what your favorite era is, or what you feel a peak era is, if you will. Because again, favorite and peak can be different things. You can have a personal favorite, but a more objective overall peak or golden era.
Right. If you're going to explain it too, try to give some reasoning. Like, go into a little bit of detail and tell us why, if you decide to comment on it.
Tell us why NBA basketball for television is the greatest game ever made. That'd be if you can argue that successfully, I bow down to your debating skills, quite frankly. But moving on to our second and final question this week comes from Molly in the forum. Shout out to you once again. Which gameplay additions have been underrated in your opinion? Perhaps something related to control scheme, a new option in controls, adjustment to the AI, game plan system, etc. Yeah, so this is another one that's kind of subjective in so much as you can say whether something is underrated or overlooked, although those are actually synonyms, so you could split hairs on linguistics there. But you have things that are known, Derek, but they're not really given enough credit. And then there are things that are just completely overlooked and not given any credit because people just don't think of them. And we can think of examples of each, I'm sure. But I'll throw it over to you first, and maybe you'll throw it back to me and I'll put me on the spot. I don't know if you've got something ready to go. But what comes to your mind first when we talk about underrated gameplay editions?
Wow. Yeah, this is a thinker. One thing that came up recently, as far as like an NBA 2K control scheme, well, not recently, but, within the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years and whatnot, one thing that they changed was the functionality of throwing alley-oops and fancy passes. So back in like NBA 2K14, in order to throw an empty pass, you have to a fancy pass. You have to hold the back bumper and either, and I believe push the pass button or move the joystick in a certain direction, and it will be a fancy pass. So it's like the back bumper and then that. And what they did, and then in order to throw alley-oops in NBA 2K14, you had to hold down the back bumper and hit like the X button, I want to say. But then what they did, and this is such a subtle change, but it's really underrated, but it's very welcoming, is they made it so fancy passing is just the double tap of one button, and then throwing alley-oops is the double tap of the Y button, depending on which controller you're using, or a triangle or whatever. It's little things like that people don't talk about that have a massive impact on your experience with the game. Like being able to do things quickly, things that make sense. The other thing that I find incredibly underrated that, again, they don't talk about enough, and it's not as good in the newer 2Ks, it doesn't work exactly the same, and it's frustrating, is the ability that you were given on NBA 2K17 to just choose which hand you finish with, on which side of the rim you finish with. And, back when we were playing games coming up, and even like NBA 2K11 and games like that, you couldn't choose which hand to finish with, right? Or which side of the hoop. Like you drove the lane, and it was like the game is going to decide how I finish this. I think this is so underrated and not talked about enough. So like if I'm on the fast break and I see my brother using a player and he's breathing down my neck on the right side, I can push the joystick to the left side and finish with my left hand on a dunk or a layup, vice versa, and the right side if I need to. If I need to drive baseline and I want to do a reverse layup, I'll, let my hand off of the turbo and I'll push the joystick towards the out-of-bounds line and I go to do a reverse layup. If I want to do a reverse dunk, I can do that same thing by holding turbo, pushing towards the out-of-bounds line with the joystick, and I can try to go up and do a reverse dunk. That joystick control and how it works is sorely missing in the last couple 2Ks. It is absolutely fantastic on NBA 2K17, and I think it's very underrated, and more people, I don't know how many people used it as much as me and my brother do, but more people should be talking about it. It really changed the way we played. And then NBA 2K17 also had the amazing feature of, if you want to do a signature dunk with a player, you're holding down turbo and you push the joystick away from the basket. And if you don't have turbo on, it's a floater. But if you have turbo on and you push your joystick away from the basket, so like behind you, he'll do a signature dunk. So like if you look at some of my brother and my highlights, you can see Jordan dunking sometimes from the free throw line. You can see Julius Erving doing his signature dunk, or Drexler doing his, etc. And it's just another great feature of NBA 2K17. So I would say those two examples, the right stick use and the double button press, would be the things that fly under the radar.
I definitely agree, and I think it comes down to being able to expand controls, and which they've been doing throughout time with basketball games. But those examples that you mentioned were really good examples of how they got it right, because we've had some deep controls even as early as the early 2000s, basically, but they were a bit more contrived, some of those controls. They've got them to a point where they're much more intuitive, effective, basically, and they feel good. There was a year there that to throw an alley-oop you had to press pass and shoot at the same time, I believe. Was that 2K13, 14?
I believe it was 2K13, if
Yeah,
I remember correctly.
which
And every
yeah,
time I go back to that game, after not playing it for a while, I have to search it.
yeah.
Like I'll like Google it on like how to do it.
It's like that in the flashy pass. It's just a lot of when it starts feeling like you're doing a cheat code to try and get a basic move to work. That's when the controls are no longer intuitive. So I do want to mention Freestyle Superstars as an example of something that's talked about a lot, but is kind of underrated in so much as people dump on it. And I think that while yes, it didn't achieve everything it wanted to and what we wanted it to, it was a big step forward in player differentiation and signature moves around about that time, around that generation. It was a stepping stone, and I think people underrate it as its ability to the way it connected one generation to another and really started getting us on the right track with that. 2K took it further than NBA Live did, but nevertheless, that is an underrated improvement there. Speaking of mechanics, though, and underrated mechanics, it'd be too easy to say defense as a whole, but if you do go back to old games, playing defense, and we talked about Double Dribble Playoff Edition, obviously, in NBA Live 95, how they do have some good bones, good blocking and stealing mechanics. They're not as precise as later games, and also, if you don't get the stop, it's much harder to actually impact the offense. So that is a problem. The balance between offense and defense. That older games, that if you didn't actually get the steal or the block, you pretty much had to hope that the timing was off or the dice roll was unkind and the shot missed. So there has been improvement there. But to that point, and on the subject of shots missing, I think one of the biggest improvements to basketball games over the years is rebounding. Now, this may sound weird because there are some funny moments with rebounds as of 2K21, some warping, the ball warping into hands and clipping through the other player because it's decided that this player is going to get the rebound. Yes, that is still a problem. But if you go back to really old games, you'll have so many rebounds that you're collecting off the floor or flat-footed, you chase them down. In old games, Derek, and I noticed this as we were playing both Double Dribble Playoff Edition and Live 95 earlier before we started recording this, is that if you jump for rebounds, you're actually at a disadvantage. So rebounding mechanics are something that have been really improved over the years that Live 19 has some problems with its auto rebound. I hate that. That's something that Live does need to get rid of if/when they're coming back. But rebounding mechanics over the years, there's a lot less. I mean, yes, there should be some rebounds that you chase down. That is realistic. But in the old games, you were chasing down so many rebounds. And pressing jump to rebound put you at a disadvantage, as I said. So I think that is one really underrated way that games have really improved, as well as the defensive game as a whole.
NBA Live 2002 has the worst rebounding mechanics in video game history, I think.
Yep.
That's the game where you literally don't want to jump ever for a rebound. You need to let it fall to you.
Exactly.
You'd rather hit the floor and just run over it in order for your player to pick it up. I think that rebounding and shot blocking, the improvements in both of those should be highlighted more in sim basketball games. You know, we go back, my brother and I, Nick, we play Legends or on the same team in general. Back, you know, we use some of the older games, and one of the things we always highlight that's frustrating is the rebounding mechanics, and oftentimes the shot block mechanics. And in the newer games, I would say probably starting with 2K15, 2K16, and whatnot, the rebounding mechanics ended up being way better, far more sound, more realistic. You can time them better. Your player will actually go will grab the ball the way they're supposed to, and whatnot. And boxing out has also been improved. And then when you're shot blocking, you can suspend shots in the air, and you're not just swatting it out of bounds, but you can suspend shots in the air and start fast breaks, and it's better to time, and your players' animations are better and whatnot. So I would say shot blocking and rebounding has really improved since 2K, probably 15. Because you've mentioned this, NBA 2K14 for next gen has a lot of the same little issues that 2K14 for PC has. And one of the issues on NBA 2K14 for Xbox One and PS4 is the rebounding and the shot blocking. It is not as good as 2K15 and up. Your players are sometimes cemented to the ground. They won't jump. The ball tracking, the hand-to-ball tracking isn't as good, etc. So I would agree with that. I would agree. You know, rebounding and shot blocking has definitely gotten a lot better over the years.
And this may sound strange. because animation variety is so important, but the addition of non-highlight plays, just very simple moves, because, and especially when it comes to dunks, because you look at a game, even at the recent NBA Live games, where every dunk kind of has to be a big dunk. It also means that it's a big wind-up, it's easier to block sometimes because it's a slower animation, you can see it coming, more predictable, and also it's not necessarily contextually appropriate, so you see players warping from spots. You see rocket dunks because they're not supposed to be jumping from there, but they've already started the animation, so they need to get to the hoop to finish. So adding small dunks around the rim and just simple plays, quick dunks, quick flushes, I think has really improved, not just aesthetically, but the actual on-court experience as well. It looks great to have such a huge variety of moves around the hoop and in the paint, but it also means you've got those quicker shots, those quicker dunks that you can finish without having to have the big wind-up. And not everything should be a highlight play outside of an arcade game where obviously you want that crazy dunks and whatnot. But that's another thing, that animation variety, and going to the trouble of adding just small dunks, just basic dunks near the rim that you can just finish very quickly, isn't just aesthetically accurate and lifelike, but is also very useful from a gameplay standpoint as well.
Yeah, realistic immersion. It definitely helps with immersion. It's funny because then you can say the opposite about things that kind of hurt newer titles where there wasn't enough animations and not enough variety. And look no further than NBA 2K20 and NBA 2K21 for the PC, PS4, and Xbox One, where they have every player does the exact same step back. Like they just have the exact same step back animation. I can use Kyrie. When I say step back, I mean behind the back dribble, like the behind the back. You like when you try to do like a quick behind the back dribble to create space, it looks the same with every player. It looks the same if I'm using Kyrie Irving or if I'm using Kemba Walker. I could be using Rudy Gay, and he's going to do that exact same step back dribble.
Play differentiation. That itself is an underrated improvement.
Right. Yeah. So. So that right there actually hurts those two titles. But yeah, I definitely agree. The little different layups around the rim, little different dunks around the rim, all of that stuff add to authenticity and immersion.
So basically what I'm saying is when you come out with a next-gen trailer, don't show me sweat. Show me a little dunk. Show me a basic dunk.
Show me a couple floater animations. How about that? Don't show me Zion breaking the rim. Show me show me DeJounte Murray going up for a floater. I want to see that.
So thank you for the question. Always great to reflect on where basketball games are going and where they've come from. And let us know what you feel are the most underrated gameplay improvements in basketball gaming history. And that brings us to the end of episode number 383 of the NLC podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed listening to us talk about basketball gaming this week once again. The NLC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, which is nb-live.com. We're also on all the major podcatching apps and platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, to name just a few. On those platforms, search for NLC Podcast, look for our logo, and that will be us. Please feel free to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, hopefully a positive one. And since we are wrapping up, Derek, where can everybody find you on socials, and any other final words you want to share this week?
Tune into Holding Court with D for free. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, CLNS Media, Amazon Audible, etc. Tune into my YouTube. I've definitely been uploading a lot of real NBA footage, remastering old NBA footage at higher frame rates. It looks really cool, so check that out. Obviously, some video game matchups between me and Stildo. 33 and Andrew as well. So definitely tune into my YouTube. I'm on Twitter where I'm the most active at D for 384, my new gaming channel at D for 3G. I'm also on the NLSC, D for 3, and Instagram, D for 384.
As for me, as I said at the top of the show, I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. The NLSC is on Twitter and Facebook at the NLSC. On Instagram, we are NLSC Basketball. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/NBLive Series Center, and of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. But yes, that's all for this week, so thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.